How's everyone doing? All right, ready for lunch? Not yet. Hopefully you can let me say my piece before indulging in another delicious lunch. So yeah, there's going to be a talk about testing culture at Etsy. My name is Mike Hernandez, if you don't know. I'm on the marketing communications team, marketing communications engineering team, Marcom for short, at Etsy. And we act as a sort of email service provider for Etsy. We're sort of like the MailChimp for Etsy. And we also are sort of fanatical about our tests. We're not the testing team. We're not the CI team. We're not an ops team. So we don't run the testing infrastructure or Jenkins or anything like that. But we're really big into testing. And this talk is going to be more of a story of how I came to come from not really ever having written a test and having heard of testing to kind of being this guy that's saying, it's like, where are the tests? When I wrote the proposal for this talk, I was thinking I'm going to get up here and I'm just going to tell everyone how great it is at Etsy and how everyone writes tests and how it's just this paradise. But as I was writing the slides, I realized maybe I should tone it down a little bit and just be real and tell you that not everything that glitters is gold, and so it's not a perfect place. Keeping a testing culture going at Etsy is a lot of hard work on my part and parts of others, and so this presentation is going to be focused on my journey, and I'm going to hopefully be able to share with you some things that you can use to maybe get something started or keep something going where you are. So that's a little bit about the talk. So here's the thing. So testing is something that some people think is cool. Some people think it's not cool. It's just your job. You should write tests because they're good for you. And I'd like to say that testing culture at Etsy is a real huge thing. But like I said, it's not as great as I'd like it to be. It's more of a testing subculture than a culture. So like you can look up here and see like which one of these people are writing the tests. The thing about the thing I like to call it a subculture, like the sort of correlation there, is subcultures. They could be weird sort of niche groups, but they do set the tone for things. When one sort of subculture starts to do something, culture at large, people around start to pick up on things that they're doing and say like, hey, that's what these cool people are doing. I'm gonna start doing that as well. And so if you can take part in something that's small, you still have an opportunity to make an impact, even if it's not going to be, okay, now everyone at my office is into it. Like at Etsy, it's such a big company now that I can't say like, yeah, I'm going to make every engineer love writing tests as much as I do. But if I can say, yeah, I got this one person into it, and then he's going to go back and say, yeah, I'm really into this testing thing. I think we should focus more, or something like that. Then I think I'm making some kind of impact, even if it's small. And the other part of this is that it is a challenge, right? It's a commitment, to put on the white makeup on your face every day when you get up and leave your house. It's a commitment. It's not just something that you can kind of talk about and then move on. It's something that you have to sort of live and commit yourself to. So part of the challenge is that you have to have support from a manager, or if you are a manager, you have to be supportive. Those can be challenging in different ways. I'm not a manager, so I can't speak from the management standpoint, but a lot of what I'm talking about today is stuff that I learned from an influential manager that I had, and he was my first engineering manager. Etsy's my first engineering job. So I've been really lucky to learn at this place. It's been a great place to start. But the thing is, if you don't have support from someone in a position of power and leadership, a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about now, it's just never going to work. And I can't just say go out and get yourself a good manager. But I can say, like, try to find someone who can be a champion for the causes that you believe in code quality, and in this example, like testing. And maybe if it's not your manager, maybe you can talk to another manager. And this depends, like maybe if this is a large company, maybe there's a lot of managers. If you're talking about a really small shop, it's gonna be harder. You know, you can't just like find someone else to be on your side. And so that's a challenge that we could talk about. You know, it's more of a people skills thing and trying to convince that one person who can make or break this effort. But if you have a supportive manager or someone that's maybe just keen to try something new, then a lot of this will work. And if you're in a position to be a champion for this kind of stuff, then be that person. I encourage you to kind of take that mantle upon yourself. So, like I said, this is a part of the story about how I got into this. And so I had no idea about testing really, and I put out some code for a code review. And so a manager said, so, you know, it looks good, but where are the tests? And I said something like, I tested in my browser. And he's like, so yeah, but where are the tests? And I was like, you mean like PHP unit kind of stuff? I don't really know. I've never done that. And I kind of panicked. I was like, damn, this is like day 3. I'm going to get fired. Like, I don't know what's going on. Like, I thought they knew that I was a junior engineer. Like, this is like a real panic moment. But luckily, I was given this space to figure things out. But I wasn't allowed to push code. So at first, it was kind of like, you know, the manager at this time, like he's a nice guy and he was smiling when he was asking me for tests. But when I tried to submit the code review again, it was more like, no, like I asked you to write tests, and now he was a little more stern about it, and it was less like the cute cat and more like, you're not going to push code until I see tests. And I was kind of like put off by that. I was like, man, this guy's really kind of busting my chops now. I told him I don't really know how to do this, so what does he want from me? And then I realized, oh, what he wants from me is to figure out how to do it. And I said, okay, so I'm going to have to figure out how to do this, so I'm not going to be able to push this probably until next week. And he's like, okay, but next week I want to see tests, and then, you know, then we'll have this conversation, or we'll have a different conversation. And it wasn't like a threat, but it was just, you know, you're given the space to learn, so go learn. And again, this is where having manager buy-in on this is huge. You have to have someone, you have to be in a position where you can say, okay, if I never did this before, do I have the space to do this? And if you don't, it's going to be an uphill battle. You know, you're going to have to use your free time. You're going to have to find other ways to make this happen. So after I got that, I wrote a test. I was able to get my code out, and I was happy and I felt good, but I wasn't really quite sold on it. And as with many people who could tell you about this, it wasn't until I actually caught something with a test that I started to think like, oh, that's what this whole thing is about. It's not just because my manager is like into testing or whatever. It's because this can actually help me. You know, and we have this thing called Try at Etsy. It's on our Etsy's GitHub. Basically, it just takes your diff and sends it to Jenkins and runs all the tests and stuff. And so I was running Try for all my code that I had pushed, and none of the tests were failing. Everything was green, and it was easy to deploy, and I was getting into this whole continuous integration thing, and I was just like loving it. And then one day, like, Try failed. I was like, that's weird. I put this small change in there, and the test that's failing isn't really my code, so I don't know what's going on here, but okay, so then I git stash and I ran Try and everything passed. So, okay, and then I popped the stash and ran again and it failed, so I said, okay, well, I gotta look into this. And yeah, and it turns out that, yeah, guess what? I was breaking this test, and this test was guarding me from, you know, breaking this other area of the system. And it was an internal tool. It wasn't like Etsy.com was going to go down because of this change. But you know, we have a large support staff, and I was working on their tool that we built for them. And so none of the supporters would have been able to do their work. And that means some people were going to have a bad time because, you know, I broke this tool. And if this test hadn't been there, hey, you know, that could have happened, and I wouldn't have been like reprimanded or something. But hey, this thing saved me. from some embarrassment, and it saved some downtime for somebody. So it's like, yeah, I get it. I kind of get it, you know. Then I had my real, like, my next big aha moment was when someone pinged me on IRC and they said, hey, Mike, there's this test that has your name on it, and it failed from with my diff, but like, there's no way that my code is breaking your test. Like, your test must have a bug in it, you know, so like, can you help me look this over? And I said, well, you know, you should stash and run the test again, and if it passes, you know, maybe it is your code, and, you know, like, take another look. And yeah, and it turns out that this was a big integration test that I wrote, because we were, again, I work on a like sort of marketing and email team, and so we were changing out the emails for the buyer and seller transaction email. So like when someone buys something on Etsy, you get an email, and the seller gets an email, and we were swapping out the system that sends those emails so that we could just improve the quality of the emails overall. And so because I was changing out such an important email, I didn't want to break those. You know, I didn't want someone to buy something on Etsy and not get their like receipt, and I didn't want a seller to not get the email to say, hey, you better put something in a box or whatever it is and go. So I said, okay, but there was no like real end-to-end. There was unit tests that covered the different parts, but there was nothing that said, if you buy something, then this email comes out and it's the right thing. So I wrote this test. It's kind of a slow test because it goes from, it's almost like a functional test in that like it literally goes from end to end. It just doesn't open a browser and like click. I could have used like the hat or something for this, but I just wanted to keep it all in what I knew. And so yeah, I wrote a test. It put something in a cart. It paid for it. It went through the whole process, and then it said, okay, I got a buyer email. I got a seller email. Do they have the right stuff? Do they have links to the things? And so I did that to cover me. But guess what? Like, this person was pushing code they didn't even realize was going to break these emails, and this test ended up catching their mistake. And because it was such an important piece of code, I was like, yes, like now I definitely get it. Like before, I caught this kind of thing, and it was, you know, some supporters would have had a moment, and before I had to revert and whatever. But now, thinking like I'm interacting with a really important part of the site, and a test that I wrote saved someone from having the right support, like, hey, you know, this order came in and I didn't get this email, like, that's bad, and, you know. So that's when I was totally sold on it. From then, I was totally hooked. And the person who broke that test started to get on board with it as well, like, oh, I'm sorry that I blamed you for having a bad test. Thank you for, you know, keeping me from breaking stuff. So that was me and my manager and this guy that broke this test. We're definitely on board. And there were some other, you know, people in the peripheral. But, you know, my manager was still trying to build a team. So we're on a new team. And he got me convinced, and he knew that. But we were trying to get more people on board. And so he tried a few different ways of getting people on board, right? So one of the ways, aside from just, like I said, like writing tests, which I'm going to just keep saying throughout the rest of this talk, he created these awards, right? So I don't know if you could even read this. I just wanted to put up, because this is an actual award. This is a thing that he wrote. That this is a prize you get if you write a lot of tests. And what he did was he wrote just a simple set of scripts that parses the git commit logs, and it looks for desirable behaviors. So writing small commits, deleting code, writing tests, that kind of stuff. And they're named after an engineer that exemplified these kinds of things. So this is the St. Hernandez Prize, which is named after me, that you get for writing tests. And so, you know, it's fun to get, it's like a digital pat on the back, like, hey, good job, you wrote more tests than anyone else on the team. But it's also like, it's great for me because I'm like, hey, there's an award named after me. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, not everyone, this is a really small thing. There's maybe 10 people that'll get one of these things, because it was really kind of just like a gentle nudge and kind of a joke, but it's also like a serious joke. So it's not going to maybe change the world, but you know what? It makes me feel good, and it makes other people feel good when they get this kind of like just virtual pat on the back, like we recognize you, and everyone else that gets these emails is like, damn, like you outperformed me in this kind of, it like gamifies things a little bit. So then the other part of this is keeping your team free from negative, like people that are going to detract from what you're trying to get accomplished. if you're in a position to shape a team, either as a manager or as a tech lead or just as a voice, like you can be a leader without having an assigned title. If people aren't on board with things like code quality and testing and like just doing things the right way, or at least what you feel is right, you gotta either get rid of those people. I'm not saying you can just fire them, like you can't just be the Donald Trump and say you're fired. And I'm not saying if you're a manager that you should just fire people that don't write tests either. You can't do that, but you should think about who is on your team and the values that you want for your team and for your company. And if people aren't on board and you're saying like, hey, we write tests around here, and this person's like, testing, but like, that's just like this thing people talk about. It's like, actually, no, I expect you to write tests. And if you're not on board with that, then maybe you're not on board with like being here. And that's a little harsh, but I know at least one person that ended up having one too many discussions that didn't work out right, that had to find a new place to work. So the other part of this is like, okay, so you're not going to go. Like I said, I'm not going to say go out and fire people. That's not like the best way to help things. But what you can do when you're not in a position of leadership, or maybe if you're just not vocal and you're not like a tech lead and you're not someone that can say let's all do this, is you can just help people when they need to write tests. So that prize I showed you up there, it's called the St. Hernandez prize. And it's because I'm spreading the testing gospel throughout the company. When people need help with tests, I've got a reputation now for being like the guy that they can go to ask for help. The guys on we have a team called Autobots, and they manage like our CI infrastructure and our tests and all that stuff, which is a lot of hard work. They're like the test experts, but they're so busy making sure that everything's working that they're not always the best people to go to and say like, hey, I'm trying to test this thing and it's kind of weird. They're who you go to when it's like, I run the test here, but then when I run the test there, it fails. What's going on? And so being someone that is available to help makes a huge difference. And I've been able to work with a lot of different people in helping them just individually and as teams as well. So Etsy has something called senior rotations. We have a lot of different engineering teams. The teams, you can switch teams temporarily. It's not like you're changing your job, but you can go to a team for a week or for 2 weeks and just work with them and see what they do. I did senior rotations with teams to help them get their testing stuff together. Like if they had really no tests, I would help them add tests. If they had bad tests, I would help them write good tests. And so I was able to work with our data team. I was able to work with the security team, the internal tools team. When I started doing Android stuff, I even was able to go onto our Android core team, which we had before we really made a really big mobile initiative. Android was a team of its own, and their testing was just kind of horrible. I mean, testing in Android and in mobile is kind of this weird Wild West right now anyway. But just to say, like, listen, we do tests everywhere else. We should be testing here too. And so I got a chance to play with Gradle and like Roboelectric and like kind of cool tools outside of what I'm generally used to. We also have this thing called Doubles Dev, which is it's something you can sign up for where you basically just pair with another engineer and just work on something. And you can bring something to Doubles Dev, or if you don't have anything to bring, we have a product quality team, and this woman, Lisa, manages a sort of bug queue. And she says, okay, like these are weird things that people weren't able to figure out alone. Let's work on them as pairs. And you can pick up these things. And when you sign up for Doubles Dev, you put in a list of what you are good at and what you're interested in working on. And of course, I put that I love testing. I love helping people get more test coverage in there. And so when I do Doubles Dev, whoever pairs with me, I learn from them, but then I also make sure that we're writing tests for whatever we do. The smallest bugs fix, it ends up getting a test. And so that's just another way that I can live up to my role as St. Hernandez or whatever. So the other thing that you can do is just whatever you're doing, just write tests. It seems strange. It's just like, it's so simple. Just write tests, write tests, write tests. You know, I'm a full stack engineer. That's like this big thing. But all it really means is I just write a lot of different kinds of code. I'm not an expert in all these different areas of code. But whenever I write JavaScript, I write tests. We use Jasmine. You know, we just ported, I don't know if there's a blog post out there about how we just changed our big data stack to run jobs written in cascading JRuby. We ported to Scalding, which is a DSL for cascading in Scala. So when we ported the Marcom jobs from cascading JRuby to Scalding, we wrote tests because we wanted to make sure that it works. Yeah, because we write tests. You know, and like just getting on board. We add an Android feature, we write tests. You add something to the iOS app, you write tests. There's so many different languages that we use, and they all have testing frameworks, and you can write tests for all of it. Because testing is just, it's a practice that you can get into that's not like, oh, well, I know PHP unit, and when I write PHP, I write tests, but you know, when I write JavaScript, whatever. Like, I hate JavaScript. I'm just doing this quick jQuery thing. It doesn't matter. Maybe some stuff, OK, if it's a quick hack thing, you know. But I'd encourage you, no matter what you're writing, think about writing tests. And I especially encourage you, if you're picking up a new language, find a testing framework for that language and learn to write the language with testing alongside. Pick a code kata and do a TDD in your new language with a testing framework. I found that that was a really fun way to learn Lua. You know, which is like, I don't really get to use it in production, but it's like, picked up a language. First thing I did was find a framework. I found Busted, which is kind of a cool, like, RSpec-y, Jasmine-y thing for Lua. So last, I just have to mention that all of this, if you don't automate the test, if you don't make it easy to run tests, no one is going to want to write tests. So I almost didn't say anything about this, but it's just such an important piece. Like, you need to be able to run all the tests with one simple command. And there's a lot of like experts that will tell you this. You know, Uncle Bob will tell you, and like, you know, all these guys, they'll tell you. And it's true. Like, you have to be able to. It doesn't have to be a button. I mean, I went and I worked at a shop where they had. You know, I was on like an engineer exchange program kind of thing, and they actually had a button. You press the button, and it ran the build, and then they had a light that turned green or a light that turned red. And you can do that. I mean, if you want to do that, you can do that, and you can make it kind of fun. But it should be as simple as like run a shell command, or you know, you can try to do fancy stuff and hook it up to Git so that every time you commit, that it'll run it. But it should be very simple, and it should be thoughtless, and it should run all the tests when you do it, and they should run fast if you can. Like, I don't know that everyone has, you know, the ability to spin up 20 VMs or 100 VMs to run all your tests and make it fast, but you know, do what you can to just run them easily. You know, and things like Travis and Jenkins don't really cost anything. You can run Jenkins on your laptop if you wanted. It's probably not like the best thing in the world, but it can help you as like a sandbox to get things going. So that's all I got for you. I mean, it's basically just please write tests. Please be helpful when someone asks you. Like, if you start writing tests, I know some of you out there are maybe on the fence, but I know some of you are like, yeah, I write tests, and like, I wish that I could get people to work on tests. It's one thing to get out there and say like, how come you don't write tests? You should write tests. If you could take 10 minutes and help someone write a test, that pays it forward, and that really will make the difference. So you want to start a culture, you have to kind of roll in all these things and try to just play the part to the best of your ability. You know, use your knowledge, and just be a nice person about it. Helps a lot too. So thanks. If you got questions, you want to chat, I'm here. Otherwise, enjoy lunch. Please do. I didn't put my joined in up on this slide because I didn't have it yet, but it's on the joined in thing. If you go to the PHP Tech, you'll see, if you scroll down towards the bottom, it'll be up there. And thank you.